这请看一下啊。
All right, so thank you so much for the opportunity to have RChain Cooperative present our work to the IFF 2021 conference. Since we only have about 8 minutes, I'm going to jump right to it. So I want to talk to you a little bit about the currency of concurrency. I confess I had some difficulties finding the right way to begin this talk. And the real reason is not because there aren't exciting developments in digital currency like non-fungible tokens or active tokens, but because there really isn't a future for digital currency. In fact, there isn't a future for fiat currency either. Why do I say that? About 40% of the world's population lives in the tropical band around the globe, and already the temperature of the world has warmed to 1.1 degrees Celsius. Just about 1.15, that region becomes uninhabitable. And even though all of the governments that have signed on to the Paris Accords have agreed, at least in principle, to hold the temperatures to 1.5. If you look at the policies and the actual projections, we're going to blow well past 2 degrees Celsius, which means that in less than a decade or just over a decade, somewhere in that time frame, 2.8 billion people are going to have to migrate. If you compare that to the humanitarian crisis of the Syrian refugees, which were arguably also climate migrants, you'll see that a crisis several orders of magnitude is going to be more than the existing infrastructure can bear. But it's not just about humanitarian crisis. It's the entire biome of the globe. 80% of insects by biomass are gone. Let that sink in. Even the people who have a positive attitude about this, the thought leaders are arguing that it's going to take a kind of coordination that we've never seen before. In his recent 60 Minutes interview, Bill Gates argues that it will take global coordination more complex than what we saw in the last World War. And yet none of the technologies that he advances in that interview are coordination technologies. So there isn't a future for digital currency or fiat currency unless humanity works together in a way we have never worked together before. Now, RChain sees blockchain as a pivotal coordination technology. It can provide the coordination substrate we need to get ourselves out of this mess. So when we say blockchain, what do we mean? Because there are lots of projects that call themselves blockchain projects. But any blockchain worthy of the name is going to have at its core an economically secured, leaderless, distributed consensus algorithm. Now, what does that mean? The upshot of that is that you can have a bunch of autonomous programs that are running independently and don't necessarily trust each other, agree on a locally stored value. And so then the real question becomes, what kind of value would you store? Bitcoin stores a ledger, right? So each node is maintaining a copy of a ledger. And that has some obvious, but it's rather limited utility. Ethereum answers that question better, much better. It says, instead of storing a ledger, let's store the state of a virtual machine, and the ledger can just be a program on top of that virtual machine. Unfortunately, Ethereum then chooses a sequential virtual machine, and that is the essence of the problem. And we'll talk about that. But let me just say that RChain improves both. It improves both the consensus algorithm and the kind of virtual machine that's stored, making it concurrent. But since we have limited time, even if you had a perfect consensus algorithm that took no time, the concurrency issue would still dominate. So let's say why. Picture in your mind just an 8-lane freeway with very good lane discipline, so not too much lane crossing, that's going to get about 8 times the throughput of a one lane freeway. Now, what happens if all those lanes are funneled down to one lane? You get the picture. But the reality is that most transactions in real life are isolated. So just think about it. Use your common sense. Someone buying empanadas from a street vendor in Shanghai are almost certainly going to be using different resources than someone who is at the same time buying grilled tofu from a street vendor in Shanghai. So that means because they're using different resources, those transactions can run at the same time, and they do on the existing financial infrastructure. But Ethereum would be forced and is forced to serialize those transactions. And this is not just true of tokens, but of all computational resources. So that causes us to ask ourselves what models of computation, what properties of models of computation would help us pick out the right model of computation for the blockchain if it were going to be a scalable coordination infrastructure. And there are 4 properties. Completeness, can it do everything? Can you write down any program that you might want to write down? Is it compositional? Can you build more complex programs out of smaller, simpler ones? Concurrency, which is what we're talking about, and complexity. Can you measure the time and the space involved in the execution of a given program? It turns out that up until the late 80s, early 90s, we didn't even have a model of computation that had all of those properties. And what that says is that you can just use this table to quickly analyze a bunch of blockchain projects. And you can say, well, if they're based on the Turing machine or the lambda calculus or anything above the yellow box here on this table, whether you're talking about Tezos or Cardano, which are based on the lambda calculus, or Ethereum, which is based on a von Neumann style machine, which it's of the same ilk as the Turing machine. All of those we can eliminate as having scalability problems. If it's using something in the yellow box, i.e. it's a mobile process calculus, then it at least has all 4 properties and is not going to face those basic scalability issues. If, in addition, it's based on the bottom row, the row calculus, then we get 2 additional features which are really important. When we're talking about building a compute infrastructure at scale, then it's not the humans that are writing the programs, it's the programs that are writing the programs. So you need a meta programming capability, which is embodied in reflection. Likewise, even if the core protocol were written by the angels themselves, those pesky humans are going to introduce bugs, which means you have to be able to catch concurrency bugs, security bugs, and many other kinds of issues that will be introduced. And their behavioral types becomes absolutely essential. What would have happened if Ethereum had been running at 40,000 transactions per second and the DAO bug had hit? In 1 second, in 1 heartbeat, $150 million would have been drained out of that contract, and there would have been no way for that network to recover. So that's why the behavioral types are so critical, which is why RChain focuses on the row calculus. Now, I don't have time to go into the row calculus, but notice that it fits on a page and it allows for correct by construction between the smart contracting language and the execution mechanism. So there are no bytecode injection attacks possible, whereas projects like Ethereum, Cardano, Tezos, and many others have to have a proof obligation that there can be no bytecode injection attacks. I can't talk about all of these other good things that I do hope we'll we have the chance to meet face to face, and we can talk about how namespaces, for example, allow you to solve for both the DAG-based acceleration and sharding acceleration using a single mechanism. But what I want to leave you with is that blockchain, as opposed to merely digital currency, has the potential to provide the pivotal coordination technology. It can provide a global computer and a global database that can amplify humanity's extraordinary ability to coordinate and work together. In particular, it can provide the ability to have on-chain self-governance. It can provide the ability to have on-chain self-sovereign identity and self-sovereign data. It can provide the means to have a reconfigurable smart power grid. And because of its decentralization, you can put it in the hands of the people who can then light the way for the use of blockchains that we never dreamed possible. So with that, I wish you a very good and successful conference. Thank you very much.